Welcome back, everyone, to Behind the Arc Basketball on YouTube. The 2020 College Basketball Transfer Offseason for sure was a wild one, with transfers coming and going to different programs. 2020 indeed was the year of the transfer in college basketball. Today I'll be talking about the 10 teams that unfortunately turned out to be the losers of the 2020 College Basketball Transfer Offseason, as these teams on the list lost a lot of their key players during the offseason. I also will have a video dropping out about the 15 winners of the 2020 College Basketball Transfer Offseason as well, so feel free to check out that video as I'll post the link down in the description below. But we'll start off here on the list. At number 10, we got a tie at number 10 between two teams, both from the same conference. Happens to be the Rider Broncs and the Quinnipiac Bobcats. So both of these teams happen to be from the MAAC. And these two teams also happen to lose their top two leading scorers from this past season. So we'll be talking about quite a bit today. The mid-major player that transfers over to the power conference levels, that will make up about half of these teams on the list. According to ESPN, 17 players made one out of the three all-conference teams from the MAAC. 6 of these players were all MAAC in 2020. 6 of these players happened to graduate. Another 6 players ended up transferring, and that means only 5 players that were all MAAC are returning for this upcoming season. All-conference first-teamer Davencio Vaughn, he is one of the players leaving the conference. As Vaughn, he is a scrappy, tough defender. He averaged just under 2 steals per game for his past 3 seasons at Rider. He also was the leading scorer for Rider this past season, as he will transfer over to Ole Miss. The number 2 scorer in Rider as well, Frederick Scott, he will also transfer out of Rider. He'll be going to Boston College. Scott will team up at BC with Rich Kelly from Quinnipiac, who happened to lead the Bobcats this past season with 16.7 points per game, 4.5 assists per game, as Kelly was named to the All-MAAC second team in 2020, along with his former teammate from Quinnipiac, 6'8" forward Kevin Marfo, who averaged a double-double and led college basketball with 13.3 rebounds per game, as Kevin Marfo transferred out of Quinnipiac as well over to Texas A&M. Now we'll take a look here on the list. Moving on to number 9, we're going to have a lot of teams today in the early part of this list to go over from the Northeast, and this is one of them. From the Northeast Conference, the Sacred Heart Pioneers on this list right here, number 9. So Sacred Heart's never been to an NCAA tournament during their 21 seasons at the Division I college basketball level. However, they have come off their past season here the closest that they have ever been to making the NCAA tournament. They won 20 games before falling to St. Francis of Pennsylvania in the NEC tournament finals. In the offseason, Sacred Heart ended up losing, however, their top 2 scorers. EJ Anosicki, who averaged a double-double, he transferred over to Tennessee. And also Kareem Ozier, who averaged 14 points per game, he transferred out to Louisiana Monroe. A third player, Cameron Parker, who averaged just under 10 points per game and had 7.8 assists per game this past season in 18 games, decided that he would transfer out to Montana. Parker set an NCAA record last season. He totaled in a ridiculous stat line. He had 24 assists along with 0 points from the floor against Division III school Pine Manor College, and a game that actually counted towards the standings for Sacred Heart, as I got them at number 9 on the list. Number 8 here on the list happens to be the Harvard Crimson, as the Ivy League was another conference that took a major hit when it came to transfers this offseason, as it would be massive to have both of these players back for Harvard, Seth Towns and Bryce Aiken, but unfortunately for Harvard, they do not have them, as both of these players ended up transferring. The good news is that the Crimson were prepared last season for life without Towns and Aiken. As Towns missed all last season due to injury, he averaged 16 points per game for Harvard back in 2017-18, while Bryce Aiken played in 7 games this past season, averaging 16.7 points per game before his season ended due to a foot injury. A terrific freshman stepped up this past season, as he'll be returning to the roster. His name is Chris Ledlum. He helped the Crimson out a ton with a life without Towns and Aiken this past season. As far as where these two players transferred to, Seth Towns, he transferred over to the Ohio State Buckeyes, while Bryce Aiken transferred out to Seton Hall. Now we'll take a look on the list here. Number 7 happens to be the Ivy League once again with the Columbia Lions. So Columbia taking a major hit once again in the offseason, losing 3 players to the transfer portal, as this upcoming season here does not look so promising once again for the Lions, as they lost basically the majority of their scoring production from their team here is basically lost from last season. So their leading scorer from the Ivy League, Mike Smith, he decided to transfer from Columbia to Michigan. Smith averaged 22.8 points per game this past season. Also, 6'10" forward Patrick Tapei, he transferred to Duke. Tapei set out this past season for Columbia due to injury, but he averaged 11.3 points per game during the 2018-19 season. And then a third player on the list here that transferred out of Columbia happened to be Jack Forrest, who averaged just under 9 last season for the Lions. Now we'll take a look here, number 6 on the list, staying with New York. So we'll take a look at Stony Brook here, out in Long Island, the Stony Brook Seawolves, as they took a major L this offseason, happened to lose 6 of their players to the transfer portal, as the players transferring include their top 3 scorers from last season's roster. And before all these players transferred, Stony Brook looked like they could contend and win the America East, that they would be at the top of the conference with Vermont. But now they are projected to be at the very bottom of the conference, as these are the players that they lost. Leading scorer, Elijah Olanihi, he averaged 18 points per game this past season. He transferred to Miami. Mikhail Foreman, who averaged 15.6 points per game, he transferred to California. And Andrew Garcia, who averaged 13.4 points per game, along with 6.7 rebounds per game, left for Georgia. Number 5 scorer, Miles Latimer, he transferred over to Bucknell. And 6'11" big man, Jeff O'Cherry, he also transferred out to Texas Rio Grande Valley. And the last player on this list here happens to be Anthony Oshefu, as he went packing to play at Delaware. Now, according to ESPN, Stony Brook's players, they just could not pass on the opportunity to play at a higher level conference for their top 3 scorers for Olanihi, Foreman, and Garcia. Now let's take a look at the list here. We'll get to the power conference teams on the list. Number 5 happens to be the Purdue Boilermakers, as Matt Painter losing 2 key pieces to his team's depth here in the offseason. Matt Harms and Nogel Eastern deciding to transfer from Purdue. Both of these players, however, they were inconsistent. They struggled last season, but they have the chance to excel at their new team, as they just couldn't find the right fit at Purdue and make progress under Painter. As Purdue's bench, with the losses of Harms and Eastern, it is gunning really thin right now. So the 7'3" center Matt Harms, he is headed over to BYU. He's expected to start right away for head coach Mark Pope for the Cougars. Purdue's defense, it takes a hit with Nogel Eastern. He was a member of the 2020 Big Ten all-defensive team for his tremendous defensive skills here, as he transferred out as well from Purdue. And if these 2 players had returned, I projected them to possibly be a top 30 team, but now I've projected them on the bubble with a slim chance to get in to the NCAA tournament with a really tough Big Ten schedule for Purdue, as basically they got all freshmen coming off the bench for this upcoming season for the Boilermakers. Now we'll take a look on the list here. Number 4 for losses in the offseason happens to be the Georgetown Hoyas. Georgetown got crushed here throughout the course of this past season by transfers, and then once again a big name in the offseason, as right in the middle of the season, Georgetown, when they're playing basketball in 2019-20, they just had players transferring out. The 2019 Big East Freshman of the Year, James Akinjo, he left Georgetown to go to Arizona. Then Josh LeBlanc and Galen Alexander, they transferred as well, as they happened to receive restraining orders back in November for accusations of harassment, of breaking and entering as well. And also another freshman was part of that one, Myron Garner, as he was accused of sexual harassment and assault as well. He transferred over to play at the junior college level. And then the biggest L happened in the offseason here for Georgetown. Major L here when Mac McClung decided to transfer and play college basketball at Texas Tech. Georgetown did, however, add in 2 grad transfers into the mix here in the offseason, with a forward from Northwestern State. His name is Chudie Bile, and also a guard from Arkansas. His name is Jalen Harris. He's expected to be a starter, but he only averaged 4.2 points per game this past season for the Razorbacks. As it looks here, season number 4 for head coach Patrick Ewing, this is expected to be a down season, with most likely another missed NCAA tournament and another finish here, most likely resulting this season in the bottom of the barrel Big East Conference finish for this upcoming season here for Georgetown. Now I'll take a look at the list here. Number 3 for losses in the offseason happens to be the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Wake Forest seeing their top 4 players leave the program, and when the team lost their leading scorer, Brandon Childress, to graduation as well, and they also lost another player here, Andrian White, to graduation. But the big player that transferred out happened to be 7-foot center Olivier Sarr, as he announced that he would transfer over to Kentucky. That was after head coach Danny Manning was fired from the program. Guard Shawnee Brown, he also transferred out to Michigan as he averaged just over 12 points per game. And also, a couple bench players here transferred in the offseason with Sharon Wright and Michael Wynn. Now, new head coach Steve Forbes, he was able to lessen the blow of the transfers lost here by happening to acquire 3 grad transfers when he took over in the offseason. Steve Forbes getting a hold of these 3 guards here as grad transfers, with Ian Dubose, who averaged 19 points per game this past season for Houston Baptist, Jonah Antonio from UNLV, and Jalen Johnson from Tennessee. As Wake Forest is also able to get a hold of 2 sit-out transfers as well. Coming over to join Steve Forbes, former East Tennessee State Buccaneer happens to be Davian Williamson, a guard who's reuniting with Forbes and Winston-Salem, and also another guard with Isaiah Wilkins coming over from Virginia Tech. So it's going to be really tough here for this upcoming season for Wake Forest to remain competitive in the ACC as far as their team, because of all these massive losses in the offseason here with transfers, that due to head coach Danny Manning being fired and Steve Forbes taking over. Steve Forbes tries to bring in a major rebuild here for the future for the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Now take a look here. Number 2 on the list happens to be the Kansas State Wildcats here on the list. Just unfortunate once again for K-State. They went from being in the NCAA tournament back in 2019 as a 4 seed, getting bounced out in the round of 64 against UC Irvine, to going 3-15 this past season in the Big 12. And this season does not look well either here, as I predict Kansas State to be one of the worst major conference teams for this upcoming season in college basketball. The Wildcats lost their leading scorer Xavier Sneed to graduation. Head coach Bruce Weber also lost the second senior to graduation with McCall Mayween. And K-State then saw 6 players go out the door and leave the program in the offseason. The most notable player happened to be Cartier Jada, who averaged 13.3 points per game. He left to go to Virginia Tech. The majority of the Wildcats bench as well left in the offseason, with David Sloan transferring over to East Tennessee State, Levi Stocker III going out to VCU, Sean Williams transferring out to Cal State Bakersfield, and also James Love and Nigel Shad transferring as well from the program. As K-State, they took a massive L here in this offseason, as they are stuck basically with a bench full of freshmen and a starting 5 that only consists of 1 senior, Mike McGruer, on the roster, along playing with 4 sophomores who played off the bench from this past season here. So not looking so high here as far as what K-State can do for this upcoming season. A really difficult Big 12 conference. It does not look so well for this upcoming season here for K-State. And that means that one team remains here on the list. The biggest loser of the college basketball offseason regarding transfers happened to be this program, Wichita State, as we still stay in the state of Kansas, as no team took more losses than this program here with transfers from the Shockers. Wichita State had 6 players leave the program this past spring. Leaving the program happened to be their top 2 scorers from last season. Eric Stevenson, he transferred out to Washington, while Jamarius Burton transferred to Texas Tech. Just an unfortunate blow of transfers here out the door after the Shockers lost their leading rebounder as well, Jamie Echenike, to graduation. Guard Grant Sherfield, he also left Wichita State. He went to Nevada after he had a solid first season, averaging just over 8 points per game as a freshman. There also happened to be 2 other freshmen from this past season's roster that would have been able to increase their playing time for the Shockers if they hadn't have ended up transferring, but they did. Noah Fernandez transferred back to the Bay State to play for his home state team at UMass for the Minutemen, while D'Antoni Gordon, he also decided to transfer to play at the community college level for Northwest Mississippi Community College. And just to make depth matters worse here, 7-foot center Asborn Midgard, he also transferred, and he went out the door to Grand Canyon University. So, however, the good news, though, for the Shockers here, during a rough season for Wichita State, happened to be a pickup here that they did get via a transfer. They were able to pick up a grad transfer with Tariq Gilbert from UConn, as Gilbert happened to be a top 35 recruit in the class of 2016. But the unfortunate part about Gilbert is that he's had bad luck during his career here in college, with shoulder injuries during his first 2 seasons at UConn, and then he went backwards last season at UConn as well, where his scoring numbers fell and his minutes decreased as well, as he only averaged 8.5 points per game this past season compared to 12.6 points per game back in 2018-19. So Wichita State adding in Alterique Gilbert, also adding in a second transfer with a guard, Craig Porter, from the junior college level. But with all these transfer losses here in the offseason, 6 of them, Wichita State, they look like they're going to take a step back compared to what they were last season. So that's a wrap here to this video. The 10 losers who lost the most out here on the 2020 college basketball transfer offseason. Also, feel free to check out my other video about the 15 winners of the 2020 college basketball transfer offseason as well. I'll put the link down in the description below this video. Make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, as this is Behind the Arc Basketball on YouTube.